So I wanted to have a quick discussion just to start teasing some thoughts before the International Music Summit about how technology is going to be disrupting music. And we're going to have a wider conversation with the rest of the team, but just to start stirring up some ideas. It's a very interesting time for electronic music. The rise of EDM over the last few years has really kind of opened up the floodgates where a lot more people are kind of getting into the scene. We've had huge sort of global successes in terms of DJs like we've never seen before, with the likes of Avicii and David Guetta, for example. And it's very interesting to see how technology has obviously played a very important part in this, whether that's streaming or just new technology that has made music production and DJing more accessible. So what are the things that are really going to be disrupting music in the next few years from a technology perspective? One of the first is most likely going to be down to the way royalties are paid. And there's this huge trend towards this idea of blockchain, which is essentially a sort of decentralized system where you can... Bitcoin, right? Yeah, I'm sure everyone's heard of Bitcoin. And it's essentially a new way to ensure that payments can be made quickly in a more transparent way. And it's a lot more fair if done right. And there are a lot of people who doubt the potential of something like Bitcoin or blockchain type technology. But what is a very interesting piece of news that just happened about a week ago is that Spotify actually purchased or have done a partnership with a company that's based on this sort of blockchain technology. And so with the likes of Spotify entering this space, you can imagine how very soon the streaming industry is going to be reimagined a little bit. There are a lot of complaints about, for example, the fact that the way streaming companies pay out is unfair, and a lot might just go towards the top labels, and some of the smaller guys have no idea on whether they're even being paid a fair amount. And so with this new technology, that's probably one of the first things we're going to see completely disrupted. After we see this sort of blockchain royalty approach really kind of taking off, you're also going to see something that's already happening as well right now, and that's going to be the rise and continuing rise of artificial intelligence and data. And one thing which is quite scary in some ways is the way companies like Sony and Google have been able to compose music using algorithms, in a sense, using a piece of AI that basically listens to music and then can compose its own song. And that can get very political if you talk to like the underground, absolute like purists. But it's an interesting avenue to imagine how computers are essentially going to start generating music and might be able to recreate a top 10 hit within a matter of moments. And this is all really happening because of this rise of data and our ability to use data in new ways. And some of the background behind this is what many people describe in the sort of programming world is called neural networks. And it's the way we create algorithms essentially by almost imaging the way our brain works and the way that neurons fire across different points to learn. And that's one of the biggest sort of pieces of technology that's pushing this forward is called IBM Watson, which is really the most important evolution in all of this. But besides this idea of artificial intelligence, which, as we know, it can be a bit scary for some people, there is another side of it, which is all about music detection and how algorithms, data, artificial intelligence to some extent can actually make sure that this whole process of remixing can be made legal. Because there's a real challenge with companies like SoundCloud, for example, where there's a ton of illegal remixes on their platform. And as a result, it gets taken down and no one really wins from that. It's also interesting to see how music detection is going to change because of this. And there's companies like Dubset Media, for example, who are trying to really shape the future of what remixing looks like so that illegal remixes could actually become legal in some way. But beyond this idea of, royalties, blockchain, artificial intelligence and data, that all falls into one very specific bundle. It's all this sort of cloud computing, data-driven approach. We've also got the physical world that we never really talk about as much, but is also being shaped. And a good example is 3D printing. And, what's 3D printing going to do to music? And how is it going to disrupt the music industry? Well, one idea is about 3D printing and vinyl. We know that a lot of independent labels are having difficulties because suddenly vinyl is popular, and all of the vinyl plants are basically they're overworked in some way, and so as a result the independents can't find a way to sort of create the vinyls in time. And so maybe 3D printing could solve that, and there's already people who are trying to make this happen, and some use cases in the past. I think Block Party engaged in a project with this in the past, and so that's interesting. But this approach to technology and the physical technology is also been happening on another side, in terms of making music technology more affordable and more accessible. A great example is Korg with their Volca range, which is a really nice small device where it's so accessible, and you can kind of create what's called a modular analog system for a couple £100. And this whole approach to affordable technology is really making music more accessible, and especially quite authentic approaches to music. Not this kind of EDM sync button approach, but a real analog mentality. And that's a beautiful thing to see, I think, for many kind of purist musicians in a sense. But kind of flipping back to the cloud data-driven approach, there's another side about music and how it's becoming more accessible. And that's the fact that you can actually now make music in your browser. The internet is changing so quickly, and with new languages and new approaches to languages in terms of HTML and CSS, for example, JavaScript, these are evolving in such a way where you can now go onto your browser and actually just start creating music and have a studio within your browser. And that's beautiful, because there might be a lot of places where, let's give an example of a youth centre, where they can't afford to actually get a ton of music equipment. Well, now they can actually help their students learn by just creating in the browser, and all they need is a range of computers, which also serve other purposes, as we know. So technology is disrupting music in a number of ways, and we really want to think about this balance between the physical and digital. And my favourite example is the way that technology is creating interactive experiences in some way. And there's a cliche of virtual reality, which is great. I'm sure that's going to have a lot of power and potential in the future, but I'm really interested in thinking about how interactive experiences are going to really change the way we engage with music. And some really beautiful examples are things like augmented reality, which you'll see an example of a project we're working on at the moment, where it's really going to shape the way that people get into music. And it might not be for the major producer, but it's for early stage fans who might never have thought they want to be involved in music, and these experiences actually inspire them to learn about music. Something that might have seemed quite difficult and abstract now is very accessible. And I did say interactive experiences are probably one of the things that excite me the most, but I lied a little bit there. Technology and music can combine in a way that can change the world in some way. And my favourite example on this is the sustainable dance floor, where energy is generated in the nightclubs by the way people dance, from the way people dance in some way. And if you think about that concept, that music can change the world with technology, I think that's a great thing to think about. And that has to be the future. We can get lost and caught up in all these ideas of creating more efficiency and creating more transparency, which are really important, don't get me wrong. You need to have that in the industry. But we also need to think about how technology can combine with music, and the power of the dance floor and the power of the fan. How can that create a more sustainable world? And so I want to leave you with some of those thoughts. We're going to pick this back up in a few days, and we'll probably discuss a lot more of it at the International Music Summit in Ibiza on the 23rd of May. But let me know your thoughts. How do you think technology is going to disrupt music, and what do you think is the most exciting aspect of it?